So again, we see, right? Last week we went through, the Lord is my shepherd. Right? We talked about all the different pieces. If you want, you can go back and watch it on YouTube, the sermon again. But what David is saying here, when the Lord is my shepherd. And so out of this, David's statement saying, the Lord is my shepherd, because the Lord is my shepherd, he says, I shall not want. Because the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Now, there's a story about a man who used to take his dog for walks, and he lived in Pennsylvania. And some of you, if you've ever been to kind of rural Pennsylvania, a lot of times it seems like there's enough room on the road for like one car at a time, and these back roads in Pennsylvania. And so this man would take a walk down the road, and off to the left were these two different farms. And the one farm had these sheep that were great looking, right? Always looked well fed, right? Coats taken care of, in a good place. However, right next to it, there were sheep that looked like this. And so he started to think, well, is it the grass they're eating? Is it, like these ones are happy and these ones are sad, right? This one took the satisfaction survey, this one didn't. And so he began to think about and just wonder, even though he wasn't into farming himself, why would these two farms side by side have sheep that look so different from one another? And doing his research, he found that everything came back to the shepherd's care of the sheep. The sheep were ultimately a reflection of the shepherd's care in their life. And so, as David says here, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He is saying first, it's the first thing he says, I'm perfectly cared for by the shepherd. David says, the shepherd's care, Father God, perfectly cares for me. He says, I am not deficient or lacking in anything. I'm provided for perfectly. Now, this is where our lives begin to maybe start setting signals all over, because we're like, you know what? I feel like I have this need in my life, and God hasn't done anything about it. And I feel like I have this going on, and God hasn't stepped into that thing. Or maybe it happened 30 years ago. You felt God should have showed up and did something that he didn't do. And you're like, no. And that often is the question is, does God give us everything we need? Does he take care of us perfectly? And if we don't feel that way, is that who's God, or he's given us the things we need? It's something inside of our soul that says, I should have had something else. God should have did this instead. But David says, if the Lord is my shepherd, which he is my shepherd, not was he shepherd, I shall not want, which means he provides for me perfectly. Do you believe that this morning, if you're a follower of Jesus, that he provides for you perfectly? And if you're not a follower of Jesus, this is what David wants you to see, that if the Lord is your shepherd, he'll provide for you perfectly in your life, the things you need. This is a deeper reflection of who God is as a person. It's actually one of the names of God, provider. If you have a Bible, you can turn real quick. If not, it'll be up here on the screen. Genesis chapter 22. You might know the story of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham brings his son up to the mountain, and he's going to sacrifice him. God wanted to see in Abraham's life, who do you worship more? Do you worship your child, or do you worship me? And as this moment takes place, he begins to lay Isaac on an altar, and there's a ram caught in a thicket. And in that moment, God reveals one of his names. It says this: Then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in the place of his son. Abraham named the place, or we would know it, Jehovah Jireh was how we would say it, which means the Lord will provide. To this day, the people still use that name as a proverb. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. You see, it's not something that God just says, okay, you know what? I think I'm going to take care of this person this morning. Like, we as people, we don't have typically we usually have conditional cares on people, right? We conditionally care for people, right? If I want to, I'll provide, right? If I'm not really feeling it today. But it's amazing that God, especially in the Old Testament, revealed himself in different names. And we see here the word Jehovah Jireh, that God is a provider. This is who God is. You can't separate that from him. And so David is saying in this psalm that the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He's revealing that to us. That's ultimately who God is. God provides for his sheep. And again, that's where the wrestle in our soul might begin to take place, because we feel like you haven't done this and you haven't done that. That's something you actually needed then. Or something you thought you needed that God didn't do. And God's like, no, I've provided for you. I've provided for you. You know, I think, personally, it's easy to question God's provision in our lives at times. Now, the church answer might be like, oh, never. But if you ever thought that God should have did something else, or you're sitting there thinking, you know what, I wish you would do this, or you pray for that and he doesn't do it, he might just be saying, no, it's not. You don't need that. That's not a provision for you. Or deep down, I know a lot of people, especially people who have walked away from faith, think, I prayed this to God. Does he even know and care about what's going on in my life? He didn't do the thing I asked of him. How is he supposed to be a shepherd then? And it goes back to God knows what we need, and he cares for us perfectly. It's his provision over our lives. Can you think right now with me? You don't need to share it right now, but think with me right now. Is there a situation in your life where you're questioning God's provision in your life? Provided for in your life? You know, this provision, right? This provision can have steps, right? Maybe it's not like, well, Lord, when I wake up, I need food on my doorstep. It could be, Lord, my child's walked away from faith. Can you provide in that situation? Right? I shall not want. I will be content with how God works in my child's life. Now, I'm not saying we don't have a role to play as parents, but that's just an idea to take this one step further. That, Lord, you can take care of them far better than I can. Where oftentimes I'm shepherd in my child's life, right? Trying to control and have all these things take place when God has a different plan. So that's just one idea. That this idea goes deep into our soul of God perfectly caring for and doing something about. You have a situation. So this psalm, the rest of it, I believe, is ultimately an overflow of this beginning verse 1. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Okay? He says now, he makes me lie down in green pastures. This is one of the coolest things ever. Did you know that a sheep lies down once it's done grazing and they're satisfied with the meal they had? Pretty amazing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters, right? Life is chaotic. Life is crazy. Still waters, God of peace. Even in the midst of our chaos, this is what he can do. That's what he's saying. But this is a fantastic, though. Sheep that are not satisfied may not lay down. And that's what oftentimes happens in our souls. We walk through life never satisfied with anything. And we wonder why we're anxious. We wonder why we have all these things. We're all feeling all over the place because you can't lay down because you're never satisfied. And this is the amazing thing that he wants us to see, that no matter what you have going on in your life, because the Lord is your shepherd, you can be content. You can be satisfied in your life. He goes on here to say, he restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. So what he's not saying is that, Lord, you're going to keep me from hard things. What he's saying is when hard things come up in your life, you have someone to walk with you through them. Jesus, the great shepherd, says, in this world you have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. That when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. This is the presence of God in our lives. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So even in the midst of chaos and turmoil in our lives, we can be content because he's with us. and he walks alongside of us. And he says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. And we're going to get into that in a couple of weeks, the depth of that. But think about that. It's like good things in the presence of bad things of what God does in our lives. Or how about this one? He ends it with this. Your goodness and your mercy follow me all the days of my life. That actually means they chase after me. That's how God is. We can be satisfied because God's chasing us down with his goodness and his mercy. Or another person would say, he's cleaning up after us with his goodness and his mercy from the places we've been and the messes we've made in life. And ultimately, the ultimate destination, we can be content. Why? Because life should not be found, satisfaction should not be found in this life. It's found in Jesus. It's found in the shepherd. But he says, I can be content. Why? Because I'm going to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. His eyes are on eternity, not just on the day-to-day, the week-to-week, and the temporal things we are dealing with in life, which are very tough and are very hard. As we looked at last week, we looked at the fulfillment of this, of Jesus. John chapter 10, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. I'm the good shepherd. I know my own sheep. They know me. Just as my Father knows me and I know the Father, so I sacrifice my life for the sheep. We see that Jesus is the fulfillment of the great shepherd as he walked this earth, and as now we follow Jesus. But he says this right before this. Right before these verses, he says this. The thief's purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and what life? Satisfying life. Satisfaction in our lives is found in the person of Jesus Christ. Doesn't matter all these other things where we usually ride the highs and lows of. Our soul can be satisfied because of Jesus. Now, this is what usually happens, though. We don't. We still think there's something inside of us that needs to be satisfied. But the second thing he is saying is that he's not only perfectly cared for, but my soul doesn't have to crave or desire anything more. I'm perfectly satisfied, content because of that. I don't have to crave for anything more. I'm perfectly content with the shepherd's care for me. Therefore, I do not need to go after anything else. So I ask myself, am I striving and straining to find satisfaction still in life? As a follower of Jesus, am I still trying to strive and strain to find satisfaction in something in my life? This is where I need your help. Let's talk about this. Let's be real about it. Where do we look to in life for things to fulfill us? Or where do we turn to in life for satisfaction? Let's throw it out. Going to church? Okay, it's a good one. Relationships, right? That can be, hang on, hold on to your word, hold it. Relationships, right? If we look to relationships for satisfaction, it's easy to find ourselves not satisfied because typically that other person hasn't lived up to what I thought they would, right? Or that other person leaves you, right? Or, especially teens, young adults, or even some adults, they've gone through life looking for that person to make them feel content, make them feel satisfied. If I only had that person to do that. It's one of the greatest ways we look to be satisfied is in someone else. Right? And maybe some of you know that recently with a spouse passing away or looking at that. Can I still be satisfied in the midst of that? Dawn, go ahead. Shopping, sure. I saw your Amazon cart the other day online. Yeah. Right? That's what hang on, I'll get to you. That, right? Shopping's is a great way, right? We call it therapeutic retail. And we all do it in different ways, right? For some of you, it's buying new furniture. For some of you, it's the new lease, right? For others, it's like the Dollar Tree. Who knows? Yeah, what'd you have? Okay. Good one. Give me some other ones. Sports? I'm not going to go there. I have learned that even if the Giants lose, I'm good. That doesn't affect my world anymore like when I was in 8th grade. So yeah, sports is another one. But check this one out. My wife, Rachel, you maybe know this, some of these statistics. My wife, Rachel, did an internship at a domestic violence shelter in the Pittsburgh area. Did you know after a local city, a loss, domestic violence cases are through the roof? Especially in the there's a Pittsburgh area, I know, when the Steelers lost, domestic violences were on the rise. Okay, and I know that's the case of other places as well. When sports teams lose, there's domestic violence cases. Satisfaction, right? Give me another one. Brian, go ahead, Paul. Sure, right? Any hobby, anything can be turned into, right, looking for satisfaction in life, or that's going to satisfy us. Brian. Right? Numbing agents, alcohol, drugs, and probably the most socially acceptable one we have is food. Right? Food's one of those socially acceptable. Food's one of those ones we really don't touch in the Christian life often, but that's one of the greatest ones that we look to, right? To feel good, to feel pleasure in our lives is, right, just to down, right, your favorite Stewart's or, your whatever the weird names from Ben and Jerry's, the whole thing, right? You just cry and eat it, So, but food's one of those ones, or alcohol or drugs. But we look to something to take away the pain. We look to something to make us feel something when that was never the case. But what often happens is we can turn to sinful lifestyles and habits to fill a place that only Jesus was meant to fill. Now, we might not say, well, my shopping's not sinful, but it is if you're looking for satisfaction there, I believe. It is when you do that, right? You're looking for the next vacation to take away something. Again, Tozer says, it's not why we do it, it's not what we do, it's why we do it. We do these things oftentimes saying, if I only do this, and at the end of the day, we're going to see Jesus face to face and realize I pursued all these things looking for satisfaction. When David says the thing in this psalm is that it's the shepherd we are called to be satisfied in. Nothing else. And we can see how that changes the way we live our lives and walk. And so he says, right, because the Lord is my shepherd, my soul doesn't crave or desire anything more. I am perfectly satisfied and content. Now, it's easy to hear a sermon like this and just walk out and complain or not be satisfied still. I remember I was in New Jersey and I was speaking to youth, and it was that youth group, and we were talking about we were doing a message on complaining and being content in life. I get done, I pray, I felt like, man, I hit that one out of the park. Immediately this girl comes up to me and I thought, okay, she wants to talk. She comes up to me and she goes, I was just thinking while you were talking, is there a way we can have better snacks here? I'm like, literally, that's what you just got out of this? That you wanted to complain about the snacks we have here. But let's be honest. We can hear something like this, maybe even feel a little sorrowful in the moment. How do we get our soul to a place in life that we too say, I shall not want? In the face of a diagnosis, in the face of relationship failure, in the face of hurt, in the face of brokenness, in the face of great things, the new this and the new that, we can say that we're satisfied and content in life. I need no more. And I believe this is something we can maybe check some things off on the surface, but you need to go deep into layers of your heart and your soul to say, yeah, I do this because of that. Or I do that because of this. As we leave here and close here, I'm going to leave you with this psalm that invites you to have his satisfaction. Psalm 34, 8 through 10 says, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. Oh, fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing." Taste and see, he says. It's an invitation that you can be satisfied with me. And as we know here in this time and place, we can be satisfied in and through the person of Jesus Christ. And so I invite you this week I invite you to be considering, are you satisfied in life? Perfectly satisfied, not only with Jesus' care of you, but just where you're at. You don't need anything else in your life. You need nothing else.